Welcome to The Professor and the Practitioner, a vlogcast mini-series where we discuss and debate the myths and realities of customer loyalty and loyalty programs from a professor and a practitioner's point of view. I'm Adam Posner. I'm CEO and founder of The Point of Loyalty and the host of The Professor and the Practitioner vlogcast, where I have the privilege of sharing the practitioner's point of view in a friendly discussion and hopefully a debate on a topic close to my heart for the past 17 years, customer loyalty and loyalty programs. On the other side of the discussion, a professor is joining me today to share their view on the same topic, customer loyalty and loyalty programs. In this mini-series, the professor I'm joined by is Professor Cristina Ziliani, PhD, who's Professor of Marketing at the University of Parma, Italy. Welcome, Cristina.
Hello, Adam. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm absolutely delighted. I've followed you for some years now, and I also saw you present on stage at the 2024 Australian Loyalty Association event. And I was absolutely blown away by your insights and your presentation. And so it's a privilege to have you join me today on the Professor and the Practitioner vlogcast series. So can you share with us and the audience a little bit about yourself and what you've been up to for the last time in your life with loyalty and loyalty programs?
Thank you, Adam. Delighted to do this. Actually, I'm very happy to be here also because in a few weeks, my loyalty observatory at the University of Parma is going to turn 25 years of age.
Wow, happy
So
birthday.
I've been in loyalty for quite some time. It actually started when I was in the UK. I was in Oxford for my PhD, and that was the end of the 90s when supermarkets in the UK were launching loyalty cards. We had not seen anything like that in Italy on the Italian retailing scene. And I decided it was worth investigating. And so, with my colleagues in Parma, we started this research project. Monitoring what loyalty programs were, how they were becoming widespread in retailing, and how retailers would use customer insight to change management, to change the way they take marketing decisions. So that's how it started. We run a conference every year in Italy. We do webinars and company training, consulting, and because we are university based, we run a master program in marketing where we teach loyalty, CRM, data science, and we prepare, let's say, loyalty talents for the for the market. So it has been a fascinating journey.
No, it's an amazing journey, and so many years that you've of experience. But what you haven't mentioned that I know about you is you're author of 50 or approximately 50 scientific papers on loyalty. That's 50. That's a lot, and 6 books. Oh my goodness! So. And the latest, which is a big news story, is you've just released, I believe it is the 2nd edition from what I've read. Is that correct? The latest one, Loyalty Management, Driving Engagement with Loyalty Programs and Customer Experience. So I'll put a link for the listeners and the audience to grab a copy in the early 2025 when we release this. So I hope they buy hundreds and thousands of your books so that we can educate the world.
Thank you so much. Lovely.
All righty. Well, let's get straight into our first episode. And as you and I've discussed, there will be 3 episodes. But the first one that we wanted to talk about and focus on is exactly what I think would be relevant to you and your book and your studies, which is the evolution of loyalty management. But I'm fascinated, what do you mean by loyalty management?
Well, thank you for the question. Now, in part of my job is working with companies, helping them transitioning, let's say, to a customer retention approach, or coming in, to bring a fresh perspective before they do restyling of the loyalty strategy or the loyalty program. So, what I usually do for starters is try to understand if everybody is aligned with what managing loyalty means. And I usually find out in any room where I work that everybody has a different view. In that, some people think loyalty management is running a loyalty scheme.
Yep.
Some people say, well, we manage loyalty by developing our brand.
Ah.
Uh, some people say, well, loyalty is what we do with CRM or digital marketing because we keep the relationship going. And all of these elements are true.
Mm.
Uh, what is true is that mm, we need to start from the fact that any company in any industry, they want to grow.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how do companies grow? Possibly they want to grow profitably. Now, for growing profitably, we have been taught in management school and with experience that companies have always taken a strategic approach that's based on developing a value proposition, creating a brand, sustaining a brand, and if you sustain your brand and that's differentiated, you create value and you measure your success with market share. So, brand management has always been the approach for growing profitably. Now, 40 years ago, another approach started to emerge. That's a strategic approach that's based on growing the value of your customer base,
Mm.
not of your brand.
Mm.
And by growing the value of your customer base, that your customers are retained in higher numbers than they would be otherwise. And this retention grows the value they give back to the company, which we
Yep.
in our business call customer lifetime value.
Mm-hmm.
And so we measure success with retention and customer lifetime value. And that approach is what we call a customer management approach. Now,
Okay.
in order to grow and have value
Mm.
by growing your customer base, you can take two paths. One is having a structured loyalty program that is a give and get proposition, which is formal, which is known to the market, and it's based on rules like points for
Yep.
spending,
Yep.
points for engagements, a currency, or simply cashback. There are rules, there's a value proposition that's
Mm.
explicit. Or you can take a non formal loyalty approach, which is what we typically see with CRM, meaning I don't have a rule, I don't have a card, I don't have a scheme that you enroll into, but the company has enrolled you implicitly in a path towards managing your relationship over time. So, uh, this is what I call loyalty management. It's actually managing the relationship with customers to grow the value of the customer base. And you can do it in two ways. It could
Mm-hmm.
be with a formal loyalty program or
Mm.
without it. In both cases, we aim to retention.
Mm. I love that. And the way you summarized it. So if I could play it back, you said, and hopefully I get it right. So in simple terms, loyalty management, you have a formal and an informal way of managing the value of your customers or growing the value of your customers. A formal way is a marketed proposition. I call it a loyalty program. You call it a loyalty scheme. I'm not a fan of the word scheme. It sounds very negative and manipulative. I prefer
Okay.
program. However, I've heard many people talk about schemes, but I try to ignore that word.
Yeah, you
Anyway,
please ignore it.
yeah,
It's
I
just
prefer.
because I'm not a native speaker of English,
No,
so
no,
I
but it's
use
not on.
that.
Yeah, it's not only the native speakers. Even in Australia, I hear people and the media often say schemes, which again sounds negative in my view.
All
But
right.
that besides that point, back to formal and informal. And the informal under the CRM, obviously you've got the data there and you've got the hopefully the transactional data, I guess, in an e-commerce point of view where you know who I am, you know how much I've spent, or maybe in a hotel when you know who I am when I've registered and come in and you've got my spend and behavior, so you can grow the value and even communicate with me if I've opted into being communicated with. When you say, can I just ask you this question about the informal ones, besides those sort of examples where I gave you, where you actually know who the customer, you can identify, you've got an identity. Are there any other ways that you can think of in the informal way in which to manage the relationship based on my behaviors?
Uh, well, maybe better than formal and informal, I should have used formalized and non-formalized,
Yeah.
meaning that you communicate externally the
Mm,
existence of rules, as I mentioned before.
mm,
So going back to your question, with the information revolution, meaning
mm,
with the internet and
mm,
web and Web 2.0 and so on,
mm,
um, technology has given us a variety of new touch points.
mm,
We used to call them channels or media. Today we
mm,
use touch points. Of them are digital, and they enable the collection of signals, let's say, the
mm,
collection of identifiers that I
mm,
can connect back to my customer. And this way, for example, I can provide some kind of personalization to the customer, which is a way of managing his journey with me or her journey with me, um, even if I have not had the customer enrolled in
in,
anything formal.
right.
So, of course, any company that has some digital presence,
Mm,
could be like a website or an app,
mm,
which we have seen, being
yep.
very big on the loyalty scene over the past
Mm,
years. Um, Digital touchpoints enable a connection with the customer, and
mm,
every time the customer comes back, possibly you collect insight about what the customer has been doing with you, and that
yeah.
can be one way of managing the relationship.
So do you think retail, where they've got bricks and mortar stores, do you think retailers can actually have an informal loyalty management rather than the formal program? Do you think they can still do that? Where you don't know me when I walk up to the counter, I haven't signed into anything, do you think that retailers can do that?
Well, that's a very interesting question, Adam. In fact, retailers, they have been among the first companies to adopt loyalty programs.
Yes,
If
formal
we
ones.
trace back, the
Yes.
origin of contemporary loyalty, everybody mentions American Airlines 1984
Mm,
launching the first loyalty program in the States. But after that,
mm,
after the airline business, it has been supermarket
mm,
retailing in
mm-hmm,
many countries, in Europe,
mm,
definitely, that launched the scheme. And,
mm,
in retailing, which is a business based on many different branches on different territories, you don't have a connection with individual customers. So loyalty cards, they gave retailers the opportunity to be able to collect individual customer data. Without loyalty cards, in those years when we didn't have digital, that was the only way you
mm-hmm.
could connect with a customer.
Yep.
But having observed retailing and supermarket retailing in particular for many years, what I am seeing right now over the past 4 or 5 years,
Mm,
the latecomers to the game of loyalty, which is the big discounter chains.
mm-hmm.
There are names that I don't know if you're familiar with, but Lidl or
Yep.
Aldi, they are
Mhm.
very large
Yep.
retailing operations in many different countries.
Yep.
In Europe, they did not have a loyalty program,
Correct.
which somehow was very consistent with the business model of a
Yep.
discounter. They
Yep.
don't waste marketing money
Yeah.
if it's not necessary. So they wanted to save as much as possible to transfer this into lower prices. And
Mm,
it made sense for many, many years when connecting with customers was costly because plastic cards, they cost.
mm,
Sending direct mail, like Tesco did in the 90s and
yep.
200s, that costed a lot of money. But
Yep.
today, what I've been seeing, and
Yes.
I'm actually working with some discounters, they have never had a loyalty card, they've never had a loyalty program, but over the past 5 years, they have launched apps. So they have loyalty programs, they are totally digital. They do not collect points. What they do, they do personalized offers because if you show your app at the till, when you check out, They collect transactional data. They use the history of your transactions to create personalized promotions. This way, they collect data again about you and they use it for managing the company. So it's actually a loyalty proposition,
Yeah,
but it's
interesting.
totally digital.
So,
Yeah.
so I love the way you gave that example with they've got the digital mechanism of the app, of which I've signed. Let's just take a little use case. So I download the app, I sign in, so I give my details, I give my email most probably, and maybe a mobile phone number. So two channels of communications. They know who I am. And I guess the proposition to me is if I go into an Aldi or a Lidl, wherever it is, I guess I've got to identify myself to connect to the transaction. So either I've got to scan a QR code or I've got to do something so that when I take my basket of goods and pay for them in some way, shape, or form, I've got to connect that data, that transactions to who I am. So I guess the app is that interaction mechanism, either scanning a QR code or some kind of identifier that connects me into the data set without the transactional. And as you've said, they don't have the transactional layer of a program, but it's still a formal proposition saying, download our app, you will get personalized offers. Please identify yourself each time, because the benefit for you is personalized offers for who you are, what you buy, and bonuses and benefits without saying points or discounts. So there's no structural element. It's still a loyalty
Yeah.
program.
Can I add something? Because I think that's a very interesting object of observation for me. In fact, they need some engagement mechanism, as you
Yes.
mentioned.
Yes.
And on the one side, they are now advertising in store products that are discounted only for app users.
Oh,
And you have to, for example, you can even have to scan a
yeah.
specific QR code
Yes.
near the product or on the
Yes.
product,
Yeah.
which creates a little bit of an engagement.
Yes.
You can turn it into a kind of a treasure hunt in a
Yes. So
way.
they
I've
gave
seen these.
gamification. Yeah.
Yeah,
Totally.
exactly. I've seen
Yeah.
this with fashion retailers, for
Yeah.
example. And the success of these apps, when you look at the user experience with the app and also the graphics, it's very, very gamified. I mean, it
Mm,
really plays on the fun
mm,
chord,
mm, mm,
and I think this is a big thing that supermarket schemes, those that have been on the market for 10, 20
mm,
years, they miss it.
mm,
In
mm,
fact, we are seeing in the surveys we carry out every
mm,
year of consumers and how much they like to interact with loyalty schemes and with the specific touch points of loyalty schemes, we see that preferences are shifting towards gamified loyalty apps
mm.
rather than the usual boring, let me say boring, even if we like them.
Oh, careful there. Boring. Yeah,
Yeah,
okay, but I get it. No, gamification is certainly
yeah,
stimulating the dopamine and making people more engaged.
yeah,
And as you know, and I know, fundamentally loyalty programs are based on gaming methodology, goals,
yeah.
rules, feedback. So, gamifying it is very much, especially for certain generations who want to, discover and engage within the app. Can we move now to, in a simple statement, how would you define what a loyalty program is?
So there are several definitions in academic literature. For me, let me go back to what I was saying before. Let's say on the one side, there's a historic definition going back to the 90s saying that
What's the
it's
Christina definition?
the Christina definition. For me, it's simply a promise to the customer
Yeah,
to give him something back in a personal way, based on the engagement on both sides to do something that's of interest.
yeah.
So that's a very, very general
Yeah,
definition
no,
because
unless you've got another definition. I love that. I mean, that's who it comes out from you naturally after all your years of experience. Is there another more defined version that you want to share that you can, because I've got one that I'd like to play back to you, but do you have another one, or are you happy with the
no,
what you
Let's start with yours. This is what I usually do in management sessions. Let's
Yeah.
start with yours, what you have
Okay.
in mind, when we discuss that.
So over the years, I as a consulting practitioner and specialist, often people say, what's the difference between a rewards program, a subscription program, a loyalty program? And there's so many names and words, and customer engagement program, a customer retention program, a benefits program. I've got a list of all of them. And I just start off with the word that everyone knows around the world, I think, is loyalty program, as two words, right? And I define a loyalty program as a long-term planned structure of ongoing recognition, rewards, and benefits to enhance your customer's life and for the business in exchange to drive incremental or predetermined improvements in behavior, which is spend more often with the brand over the long term, in belief in terms of influencing love, trust, and referring the brand, and in belonging in terms of influencing their feeling towards the brand purpose and being part of a community. So in very simple terms, it's a long-term plan structure of ongoing recognition, rewards, and benefits to enhance a customer's life in exchange for some changes in behavior, belief, and belonging that the business benefits from.
Adam, let me say this is perfect. And I think I'm going to ask you permission to use it in my course with my students, because I
Yeah,
think
with
it's
pleasure. Oh my goodness. I'd be honored. It's not, you can say that, the little practitioner down in Australia, worked for a long, long time trying to refine it. And every time I say it and share it with people when they're confused, and then they say to me, do you think a rewards program is a loyalty program? And then I say, well, according to my definition, rewards is one of the ongoing recognition and rewards and benefits. So when you break down the pieces, there's elements. Not every program has recognition, rewards, and benefits. Some just
exactly.
have recognition, some have a bit of both. And it depends on what a reward is. Is a reward a transactional reward? Is it a birthday? What does a reward mean? Is a benefit, an exclusive event? So all the layers underneath recognition, reward, and benefit actually forms the proposition. So that's why I get clarity. I give clarity off the back of that definition. Anyway, thank you for that compliment, and you're welcome to use it with pleasure.
Thank you. Absolutely. Because as you mentioned, remember you asked me for mine, and mine
Yeah.
was very, very general. That's absolutely the reason,
Yeah,
because it can take many forms.
I
Now,
know.
luckily, in my language, in Italian, we call it only loyalty program. We
Oh,
don't have all the other names and definitions.
yeah.
So for us, it's difficult when we see all the expressions that you have in
Yes.
English, as you
Yes.
mentioned, yeah, because companies say, but what are the differences? Because for us, it's simply loyalty.
Yeah.
But as you said, they take many forms, especially today, where there are a variety of touch points. When
Uh,
you take away the plastic card, uh,
no.
to a certain extent, it doesn't look like a traditional loyalty scheme, but it's definitely a loyalty
Yeah.
program. Sorry, I
Yeah.
won't use scheme again. I've learned about that.
Okay. Well, that's a
But
big
yeah,
win.
I totally like yours. So
Okay.
yes,
Thanks. Well,
you've been in my class.
no, thank you. Let's finish off with on this episode with one question I have for you, which I'd like to hear your point of view on something you mentioned to me when we first met, which was the evolution and three phases, as you called them, of loyalty management. I'm fascinated. Could you share with the audience, what that's all about, and then we can finish on the episode on that, if please.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, actually, this is based on, as I said, observation for many, many years of how loyalty management has been taken up as a strategic approach by companies. Now, we mentioned earlier in the early 90s or late 80s, companies started to measure for the first time that there is a direct correlation between customer retention and company profits. And that was the first time that, thanks to the databases that existed in the 80s and didn't exist before, that was the first time that companies, for example, companies that have a contract with customers like insurance or banking, they were able to measure exactly what it means to retain customers in terms of profit for the company. And that, for example, happened, as we said, in the airline business in the States. Because of deregulation, there was an explosion in competition. Everybody wanted to steal customers from one each other. And so companies started to look at their own databases to see the value of customers. Then they decided to keep the most valuable ones, which are the frequent flyers. And so we had the programs. So the first reaction to the understanding that there is a connection between retention and profit was developing ski programs like clubs, to keep your members, right? The tool was so successful that it was copied in many, many industries for 10, 15 years. And at a certain point, some industries like supermarket retailing, they became very crowded with schemes. And consumers had a variety of loyalty cards in their wallet, and having one was not a way to distinguish yourself anymore. I'm speaking on the company side. So companies started to look at other ways to connect profits with these efforts. And that was when they discovered that if they used individual customer information for managing customer relationships based on the stage the relationship was in, like a new customer, a growing customer, a customer who had elapsed and you wanted to get the customer back. If you managed segments of customers or even individual customers based on what you knew about the customer, that was a way to create value. Again, because you would retain that customer, you would create customer lifetime value or develop customer lifetime value. That was the age of CRM. So from the 80s to the 2000s, let me see, we have seen companies simply launching loyalty programs and enjoying the benefits of customers, as you said, staying, speaking, good words about the company and spending more and so on. But they didn't really look much into the data, also because we didn't have the ICDs that helped very much on that side. Then around the year 2000, generally speaking, across many countries, we saw the second phase, which was the CRM phase. And let me say that in general, this is still the stage where the majority of companies are. They are investing in CRM, they are developing their own CRM approach, and so on. Now, what is interesting to notice and to explore is that with with markets becoming more mature, and with the information revolution bringing on new touch points and new tools in terms also of analytics, of measurement, and so on, companies today are focusing more on customer experience.
Is
So
that
let me just
is that the third
let me
phase?
define. Sorry,
Is that the
Adam.
third phase now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. So just to get to the third phase, customer experience.
Yes,
Okay.
the third phase is what we call customer experience management. Now, we define customer experience as the reaction that customers have to encountering the company, encountering the brand on different touch points. And the reactions, they encompass behavioral reactions, like speaking or shopping or buying, but also emotional reactions, how you feel, or social reactions, or cognitive reactions. You build up an idea of that company being, like, for example, competitive or not. So if the experience is the evolvement of these reactions of the company to the encounter with the company over a variety of touch points, a positivity of this experience brings retention, which brings profit. So companies now have turned to working to develop retention by creating a positive experience for the
Yes.
customer, which is a shift
Mm.
because across these three phases, managing loyalty has moved from being a very tactical thing, you can have it or not, to being a strategy. And this is how the customer management approach that I mentioned at the beginning has become today the most common across several industries. You may have the exception of fast moving consumer goods, where branding is still very, very strong. I mean, brand management, but the majority of industries, they are working now on experiences. So
No,
that's the triumph of loyalty marketing in a way.
yeah, that's beautiful. So those three phases, the first, can you remind me of the first phase? What did you call it?
Yeah, well, I simply call it loyalty programs,
Okay, so
CRM, and customer experience.
loyalty program, CRM, and then customer experience are your three phases. Fascinating. I'm sure we could spend another hour talking about that. And do you cover some of that in your new book?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah,
Okay.
because that's the vision, the underpinning.
So just a very quick summary then. Thank you for the very first episode. This has been enlightening, and I'm glad that also I've shared a couple of thoughts with you, but also learned so much from you. Could you just summarize briefly for us, what's in the new book, so that people can then see, go through the link and grab a copy? What's it all about?
Thank you. Well, so the book begins with this idea that we have that over the years, companies have discovered the connection between retention and profit.
Okay.
And we share, basically, the book is about also sharing the state of the art of academic research internationally, meaning not only mine, but the research of, acclaimed researchers all over the world who deal with loyalty. So we share research about the connection of a customer management perspective with profit, because there's a lot of evidence today, and that's the beginning of the book. Then we analyze a little bit of the origins of the approach, so the three phases that we mentioned. And then we look at the future of loyalty by discussing the impact of, especially of artificial intelligence, because there's a lot there, both on the side of predictive and generative AI, and how that will make loyalty management evolve. And so that's another point. Then we share research on the role of engagement to develop loyalty. Research on customer experience, that's another chapter. Then there's a big study that we've done on sustainability and loyalty programs.
Yeah, I've heard you speak about that. So there's plenty to share, and I think we'll talk about that in another episode. I'm going to finish off on this episode now. Thank you for that little overview of your book. I'm really looking forward. I think I've put in my request to order one. Hopefully it arrives by the time we release this, or it's out in market. So for episode 1 of The Professor and the Practitioner, I'd like to say thanks to Christina, and we'll be looking forward to chatting more in episode 2, which will talk a little bit about the future of loyalty programs in episode 2. So for now, thanks very much for listening or watching, and have a happy Loyalty Day.
Thank you, Adam. It was lovely to be here with you.